All right. So you can see my screen, right? Apologies for that. For that delay. So confirm that you can hear me clearly and can see my screen as well. Hello. Are we together? Hello. Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So today's session is on Excel, that's macros, right? But before we go into that, I we stopped somewhere somehow abruptly yesterday, and I would like to kind of um, finish up. That's to um, um, tidy up with what we were supposed to do that yesterday that we couldn't do. So I will do that very quickly, and then we can now delve into the business of the day. And just for those that were not here, the recording will be made available. The recording of yesterday's session will be made available. So um, we did a number of things, which included it was basically on Power Query, what it is, a graphical interface walkthrough, and the features, and then we did other things like connecting to the different data sources, text, data files, and websites. We did that yesterday. Then we also did some data transformation. Yeah. But then the the second aspect of the remaining thing we were supposed to do yesterday that we did not cover was more on kind of taking an in-depth um, walkthrough of the data transformation, that is data cleaning and transformation with Power Query, right? So that's what we do. Although we did some basic transformation, but the data set we used was kind of reasonably well structured, so there was no much thing to be done regarding that. Okay, so we're going to do something today that would help us at least gain a kind of a deeper insight into how it works, and I believe it will help. So let me set my highlighter so that at least you can follow my script. All right. So sorry, we're going to use this data set for today. Let's open it, and by the end of today's class, you would have an understanding of data cleaning, the need for data cleaning, and how you can go about it. We may not exhaust everything, but at least we'll have a foundation to build upon. So this is a data set. This, I mean, a sample worksheet containing some data. It contains sales data, that is daily sales data. This is for 1st of January 2018, 2nd of January, 3rd, and so on. Then it has the name of the salesperson, um, the region they cover. I mean, the region north, east, south, west, right? The actual sales made, which are these numerical values you are seeing here. Then this is like a total of sales for each region. And then what you see in parentheses here is the ID, ID of the manager or salesperson. And you see the same pattern repeat um, here as well. It's basically the same thing, just that the figures change and perhaps the ordering of the salesperson change. Sorry about that. So you could see that we have Mark, the first Mark here, and the second Mark here. They are two different persons. And how do you differentiate? You differentiate using their sales ID. I mean, salesperson ID. The first mark here is 3305. The second one ID is 1336, right? So they are different persons. Hence, the value in the parentheses would help us differentiate. So the pattern repeats. It's basically the same thing. And when you come down here,
Sorry, excuse me. Are you cleaning data?
yes, we'll do data cleaning.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So if you come down here, you see that we even have more salespersons down as we move down, like from six. We start having more salesperson here. They're about six. Here they're about. I mean, here they're about how many? About eight of them and the rest. So this data is not yet in the right format for analysis. So when you hear dirty data, dirty as in dirty, it doesn't mean that data contains sand and stone. It just means that it's not yet in the right format that we can use for analysis. Right? It's more difficult to work with this data in this format. Now let's see what a clean uh, alternative would look like. The same data set we saw before has been um, transformed, cleaned, and then it's now in this format. You could see that salesperson is now a column, right? And each of those salespersons are under here, right? In their own column. We have salesperson ID, what we saw in the other place in parentheses. They have been brought into a column, no more in parentheses, right? We now have date. Now, if you come here, the date information, you can find it here, just like 1st of January 2018, 2nd of January, and so on and so forth. But now we have them in one column, right? Then we have region, the same thing. Instead of having the region repeat as you see them here, northeast, southwest, northeast, southwest, and so on and so forth, like having to occupy four columns, we just have them under one column, right? Here. Then sales value, the actual sales value, the same thing. Instead of occupying everything here, we just have it to align. So that's a typical instance of data cleaning, right? So we are going to work on this same data set. So although at the moment you don't have access to this data set, so I would share it alongside with the recording so that you can practice along later on. Then, so first of all, how do you know if your data is clean or not? Okay, there is a rule to guide you as someone working with data to know when your data is in the right format. The right format of your data can vary actually depending on the actual type of analysis you want to work on. There are different data that can come in different formats, like if you are trying to create something like a network graph, you would have data in JSON format, like defined in a certain format that you can develop all those, I mean, set connections and the rest. But the most important, I mean, generally accepted form for a clean data is that number one, all um, observations, all observations should form. Okay, let me start with all variables or features should form their own column. Yeah. So what is now a variable? Variable could be something like this. As you can see here, we have salesperson is a variable. Salesperson ID is a variable. Date is a variable. Region is a variable. Sales is a variable. You feel that all these ones are now under their own separate columns, right? Unlike here. Here we could start sales here. This sales here is just standing here, and then we have salesperson here. Along with we have three different variables here under one column. You could see sales for. I mean, okay. Let's say salesperson here. Date, the date information here. The salesperson ID here. Those three are under one column, but they are supposed to be in their separate columns since they represent different, they contain different information or different data points. That is it about variable. Then each observation should form their own row. Each observation should form its own row. So what does this mean? What is an observation? An observation is I call it a group of data points that can be treated as holistic, right? So what that means is that if I am interested in this salesperson James, the sales James made on this day, which is 1st of January 2018, right? Then the set of information, the set of data that I need to have a coherent um, knowledge of what that sales was for that particular day is that number one, I need information. I need to know that is the name of the salesperson I'm interested in. This is James, right? Then the ID of James, because we have more than one James here. Which particular James, right? So we have this first James that has the ID number 1769, and then the date that transaction was made, the region that very James the sales for that particular region, and then the region of interest, and then the actual sales value that James made. So these five data points make up a complete observation, right? So they should be entered under a row, right? As you can see here, it was entered under a row here. Row, as you already know, is rows are like moving from top to bottom, like um, they are placed under each other, right? But columns are placed side by side, as you can see here. This is a column, another column, and the rest. But then this is a row. This is another row, another row, another row. So now let's use a typical example that can apply to us for us to understand this. As we are here now, let's say each of us have our own name. For me to know the people, for me to create a kind of a kind of a record for people on this call now. Let's say person one. Like, okay, let's start with name, then location, depending on what I'm interested in getting. Location, then should I say industry, and what else? Let's say um, gender, marital status, right? That's for each one of us. So I will now come and enter. These are the data points I want to gather, right? Now I have defined the heading for the data point. I now know the data points I want to gather, right? Now the next thing is now to start entering my records, right? Records are now going to be. I will now pick the first person, person one, person one. Or let me just see name of person one, right? Let's just assume that person one is Mark. Let me use Mark, right? Mark is in Lagos. Let's say Mark is in Lagos. Let's say Mark is working in the IT industry, information technology. Let's say Mark is the male, of course. Then Mark is married, right? So these five data points make up the record for Mark, right? The same thing, I'll repeat the same thing for the second person, the third person, and so on. Now, what this rule is saying here is that for each observation, for each observation, we should enter every observation in their own row. They should form their own row. So it then means that it will not make sense having to enter the record of the second person. Let's say Jane. Then we now have Jane is in Enugu. Then we now have Jane is in marketing. Then Jane is female. Then Jane is single. Okay, so this goes against the rule of the clean data because we have two records. One, this is the first record. This is the second record. This is the first record, right? So these two are not supposed to be on the same row because they are different observations, right? They're not supposed to be on the same row. They are different observations. All right. So that's what the second rule is saying. So you can see now I mean, two different records on the same row. On this row too is wrong. I hope you are following. So the best thing I would have done would be to bring the records for Jane. This the record for Jane. Let me copy it. Let me come here and then place them here. So they now have their own row. That makes it a clean, well formatted data for your analysis, right? So the third thing for a clean data is that every group of observation should form their own table, right? You have your own record here. You have this first observation. You have the second observation. Let's say we have another observation for charity. Charities in Kano. Charities in should I say health. Then charity is a female. Then charity is married. Okay. So these three things, let's say these contain our like gives us a complete record of our audience, the people we're interested in, right? And then they are a complete data set, right? So the third rule says that every group of let me just write it. Every group of observations should form their own table, right? That's what the third rule says. So I now have record for Mark. I mean, for that's this one is pertaining to the name of the individuals. Now, this is related to this is just related to the demographic. It contains the demographic data about my audience, right? Now, it makes sense to have it in its own table, but let's now say we want to gather other data, right? That could relate to, should I say, um, how can I, which instance will I give now? Let's say I want to gather data that kind of relates to the um another different department in my organization. If this is if this were a school, if this were a school, right? Then this kind of data should be found with which people records, right? Now let's now say I'm looking for another group of data that pertains to let's say our clients, for instance, right? Information related to our clients. Okay, these are my staff. So let's call it staff data. These are my staff. Let me just call it staff data. Um, okay, let me call this staff records, right? Then let me create another one for clients. Now the first client is John. John is in John is in IT, right? Okay, I will need to change for this to make sense. I will need to change this. Let me just instead of industry, let me just change this one to region. Then I now have that's the region the person is in charge of: east, west, then south, right? Then let's say this is the client now. Name, then industry, um, name, industry. What are those other points you might be interested in knowing about our clients? Date of first purchase, right? The fourth thing I might be interested in is um should I call it the staff in charge of as account manager, right? And then what information, what other information may I want to acquire? Just as much data as you will be interested in getting about your clients, right? So let's say the first person is now John, the second person is Luke, third person is um let's say Priska, right? Okay, so which industry is a John? Um, Health, IT, entertainment. Okay, then date of first purchase, 1st January, 1st July 2022, 3rd May 2024, 23, 1st September 2020, right? And then the person in charge of this staff, I mean the account manager is my staff that is responsible for um let's say taking care of this person's inquiries. And then so let's say Mark is in charge, or let's say Jane is in charge. Then we now have Mark, then let's say Jane again. So for now, Charity does not have yet. Okay. So you can now see that these two records are kind of somehow different. It will not make sense for me to have them together with this one, because this one is my staff record. This is client record, right? So what this third rule is saying in essence, I think I've taken so long to explain that, is that this is supposed to be its own table, while this should also be its own table, right? So I can now have two different tables, right? For staff and then for student. I mean staff and then for clients, right? That's what this third rule is saying. And once you master this, then it will be easy for you to then remember that for me to connect to this table, right? There is the way I can link this one and this one up. Why? If I want to link them up, I can simply there's a common column here. The account manager is my staff. So if I come to this table, I can simply connect this one and this one using this column, account manager and then name, right? So if I want to see all the clients that Mark is in charge of, I can simply connect this table to this. We saw how to merge tables yesterday, right? So we saw how to merge tables yesterday, merge queries yesterday, and then with that we can achieve the same purpose here to now connect this one and this one together. So we now have a kind of a bigger table whenever we want to analyze. But for coherence sake and to make it easy to manage our data, it is safer and it's better to put them in separate tables. Then whenever I need data from one table to the other, I can now connect them together, right? So those are the three rules you should keep in mind when working on your data. Then there are a lot of other things you should keep an eye for in data when you want to clean your data. You should know that there are issues related to data quality issues. Unfortunately, we don't have a slide to record all this. So issues to take note of, we have quality issues, and then um, tidiness, quality and tidiness issues. Everything I have tried to explain all this while related to putting tables like these three rules, right? One, two, three are mostly about data tidiness. Tidiness is related to the organization of your data, right? Just imagine you could have a room with cloths hanging on the door, with pots on the table, with should I say your phone on the window, and the new things scattered. Now, the truth is that that room may not really necessarily be dirty, right? that room may not necessarily be dirty, but it is untidy, right? Things are not in order. Things are not where they are supposed to be. That is what tidiness is in charge of. Tidiness is, are your data where they are supposed to be? That is where these three rules we already mentioned, and that's what these rules we mentioned take care of. Then the one of quality, data quality means that the data itself, is it really in order? Is everything right with the data point itself? No longer the organization, but the data, no longer the way the data is arranged, but the data itself. You can have an incomplete record. Let's say now, John is actually in charge of, Mark is actually in charge of a north, but then in our data, we mistakenly stored it as east, right? That is an error. So it's now a quality issue. This data has an issue. If it's we're a student now, a student that made a CGPA of 4.5, 4.5, and then because the lecturer was compiling the result in a rush or there was an error in the calculation, you now give the person um, 3 points, let's say 3.2, right? It's an error here because this is what it should be. Meanwhile, this is what we have. So that's about quality, but that is not just all. You could also have instances whereby we have missing data, right? Maybe this student wrote a test. Student A, student A wrote a test, but then it was recorded for the student that the student did not write the test. They now gave the student zero for a test the student wrote, right? That's missing data, right? So that one is also an issue, a data quality issue that you should look out for when working with when cleaning your data. And then there are many other things you have to consider actually. But I'm just giving like a kind of an overview, so we may not be able to exhaust everything today. That's the little introduction I have for this. Now we now want to see how we can clean this data, bring this data into this format. I mean into this format that we have it now. And the way we're going to do it is such that even if the salesperson or the manager responsible for entering these records for each day is not even someone familiar with Excel and maybe let's say you are the analyst or you could even be the manager, but the people you are managing, like the people under you, they don't have the knowledge of Excel like that or that can help them, and then they don't even understand all these things about the way this data should be structured, right? So learning how to do this will help you so that while they continue entering their records every day, they will make they will keep a kind of a log of the sales record they made for that day. While they keep doing that in the way they are advanced with, like as you can see here, right? We want to kind of create a data cleaning workflow that does not have to alter this already existing method of entering records, right? Does not alter what is already existing. Rather, it makes it more elegant such that I can still connect to this as it is, and then the next time I open my worksheet or whichever one I want to analyze the data with, I can have it in this format. That was the same thing we did yesterday, whereby we connected to a data source without changing the underlying data, but we were able to perform the transformation we needed, right? So that's a little introduction I have regarding this. So we spent lot of time. So I'll quickly open Power Query to. I'm not going to dwell so much on this because we did it yesterday. I would launch Power Query quickly to connect to our data source. Okay. I guess Power Query is coming up. All right, Power Query is up. So the next place to go to is new source. We need to connect to a new source, right? And then our source, our data is in what format? I did not check. I think it's in Excel. Yeah, it's in Excel format. So it's Excel workbook. Alright, so let me connect to the this is dirty data. I've opened it. Okay. The one I'm interested in is which one? Let me confirm. Sales one. No, this is the clean one. This dirty one we want to work on. Yes, this is the one we want to work on. So I'll click on it to select it. Okay, so I now have it. I think I need to remove this ones. Let me delete this one. Let me delete it. Because I'm not missing something. Oh, I'm gonna say for side. Let me just leave that. But this is the table we're interested in, right? And then we now have our data in this form. We have our data in this form, right? You could see that Excel has already applied those steps like we saw yesterday. First of all, connected to a source, they did navigation, promoted headers, moved the columns here. That's the ones that have data for the first row. The first row with data was made the column header. Then changed type, right? Okay, but then it still did not get it right because this is a sales for our dates information was still looped into and then made the column header, right? So that's not what we want. Where can we start now? What are some issues? We already identified a number of issues here. So let's start by restoring this thing back. Let me just okay. Let me just close this step where it's promoted header. We'll still do that later on. Now the first thing we would want to do here is you will see now. Let's split this data info. Let's split this column. You see that we have sales for. We now have column. Let me zoom in. Sales for colon then date. We see the same pattern repeated here, same pattern repeated down 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 and so on and so forth, right? And then um so we can start from there, right? We can start from there and split this column here so that we'll have a column for date, then the other column that contains everything from sales for, right? Let me just show you quickly how this works. We have sales for, we now have column, then we now have date, right? There's only one place where we have this column here for this particular set of records. When I come down here, I still see the same pattern here. So I call this thing separating this column separating this text sales form and then the date. We call it delimiter. Delimiter. So it delimits like it's kind of a separator, separates the first part, the left hand side from the right hand side, right? So we can leverage this. You can still see another delimiter here, for instance, in this column where we have James, we now have open parenthesis, we now have the ID in parenthesis, then we now have closing parenthesis. So for me, if I want to extract James from the ID, remember that James is supposed to be in its own column as the name, then ID is supposed to be in its own column as the ID, right? As we saw initially. So the separating thing here is this opening parenthesis, or you can even use this there's a space, a white space between s here and this opening parenthesis, right? But then it just makes sense to use this opening parenthesis, opening parenthesis as our delimiter, just like our colon here is a delimiter. So we can use that, we can leverage that, right? So we'll see quickly see how to do that. Another thing we would want to remove is we have this total. It's not necessary. Since once I have my data in the right format, I can always get the total when I want it. So I can just simply or safely eliminate this row called total, right? Since I can always get it back from the resulting data. So let me just quickly do that. Let me filter that. Let's take that as our first step. So I can just come here, scroll down. Where is total? This where is total? Down. This is total, right? So I can uncheck it. Once I uncheck it, we are good to go. It's gone. Okay. Now another thing to take note of is the fact that we have this column empty, right? No. And how did it come about? If you check in the original, you check in the original data file we used here. Oh, sorry, I may not be able to show it now because PowerPoint is on. Or okay, no, this is not it. I may not be able to show you, but you could see that in that original file, right? The records for the first set of records was demarcated from the second one by some empty lines. Those empty lines are what these null values are representing. So we just need to remove that one too. So I can come to this column. I can also safely filter for this null, right? I can just filter for this null in this column and click on OK. So what do you now have? You now have everything like sales for, then the sales record. We now have another sales for, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the first thing, or we've already done the first and second, but the next step we would want to take is now to split this column, like I mentioned initially. And how can I achieve that? Let me use this tool called split column, right? When I click it here, we're in the home tab. When I click it here, I can see options. I can split by delimiter, like I already mentioned earlier on, which is what we are going to use. But then we still have other options we can use by number of characters, by position, by lowercase to uppercase to lowercase, by digits to non-digit, by non-digit to digits, right? So depending on the data you are working on, you can choose which option applies. So in our case, we are using by delimiter. I click on it. So let's give it time to open up. Yeah, so we now have split column by delimiter. Now say specify the delimiter used to split the text column. Now this is where we now enter the delimiter. The default value to enter is space, which does not apply to us. In our case, we want to enter colon. Yeah, this colon. But even if it's not colon you want to enter, let's say it's something like an opening parenthesis that you cannot see it here. You can click on custom and then you can simply enter the opening parenthesis as your delimiter. But for now, let's work on a colon. Now it now asks the next question: split at leftmost delimiter, rightmost delimiter, each occurrence of the delimiter. I think this is pretty straightforward. In our case, we just have one column here. But imagine we have something like sales for colon, date colon, uh, region. In that case, we now have two delimiters, right? That's where these other options might make sense. But in this case, we just have one of them. So any of these options can apply actually. But let me just put leftmost delimiter. All right, so this option, yeah, just leave this quote character and the rest. So let me click OK, and then let's see what happens. So what happens now, if you can observe, is that we now have, let me go back up. Look at how this data was before. Sales for colon the date, right? But after performing that transformation, we now have a colon here. Sales for is separated from date, and then the colon is gone because colon is our delimiter. So it's like a boundary. It's that one will disappear afterwards. So we now have um the date and then sales for, right? But then you notice that every other thing, every record here you are seeing here is supposed to inherit from this date because those were the records of sales made for that particular day, which was 1st of January, right? But then we just have it for the first row here. The same thing repeated here. We now have sales for, and then every other thing under here is null, right? We just have this one, we just have this one, and so on. But that is not going to be an issue. We can still handle that. What we are going to do now is we want this date to be repeated here, here. We want to see it here, and see it here. Then the date now changes. That's the record for the first day. Second day is now 2nd of January, right? We now want to have this second here, second here, second here, second here, and second here. Then when it comes to third, we now have third, and so on and so forth. We are going to see how to do that very quickly. There's a function Excel offers which is called fill, that is fill. You can fill up, you can fill down. In our case, when you fill up, when you fill up the data, when you fill up the first non-empty cell it meets, yeah, it populates that value upwards. So let's assume this one was not found, this one was not there, and then the first non-empty cell is this 1st of February. I now want to push all this data here. Let's say I want this 2nd of February here, second here, second, 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 right? Assuming this one was not there. That's what fill up does. But fill down takes the value from the first non-empty cell and populates it into every other empty cell until it continues, until it gets to, let's say it takes this one and continues, put this one here, put it here, put it here, put it here, put it here. Now, on getting to this other one, this one now, which is second, it is no longer empty. It now meets a totally different value, right? Now, instead of this, it now takes this second. So here now, it's going to have second of January, second of January, second of January. On reaching here, it means another non-empty cell, third. That's what fill down does. But fill up goes the other way around. So in our case, fill down makes more sense. So I'll select the column. I'll right click. Then I'll go to fill. This is fill. I have fill down and fill up. So I'll simply select fill down. So just watch what will happen. So you can see everything I've explained all this while. Right? This first move from here to 3, 4, 5, 6. Then on reaching here, we now have second of January. Then 2nd of January. Then here, third. I hope you are noticing. So that's what fill does for us. All right. So the next thing we'll do. So we have achieved one, right? So we can even call this column date. Yeah. But let's keep going for now. Now the other thing you notice is that this thing called sales for is not useful again to us. We don't need it. It's not representing anything actually. So it's not the actual record we are interested in. Sales for is not the actual record we're interested in. And then this salesperson is supposed to be a column. We'll get to that. So we can easily filter this one out, right? Let's see if we're not going to miss any data when I filter it out. Yeah, we're not going to miss any data in the sense that when I filter this sales for out, it means that this entire row is going out, this entire row is going out, this entire row is going out, and so on. But then this date is going out, but it will not affect anything, it will not change anything since the actual record, the actual date, the actual records have their own date already. It's still the same date that has populated here, right? So what do I do? Let me filter this out. Let me just filter sales for out. So I can just uncheck this. Okay. So it's gone, right? Okay. Now, what is the next thing we should do now? The next thing we can do now is to separate the name from the ID. That is James and the ID for James. So just like we did for the date and the sales for, there's a delimiter here, a suitable one for that matter, which is this opening parenthesis, right? It separates James, it separates the name from the ID. This other one separates Tim from the ID, and so on. So I can leverage that. So let me just select that, split column by delimiter. Then this time around, I'm going to use, instead of space, I'm going to use custom. Then what's the custom value? Opening parenthesis, right? Now the option of leftmost, rightmost, and the rest, anyone can apply it since we just have one occurrence of it. So let me just use leftmost. So then I click on OK. So we now have two columns now. This is the first column. Now has just the names of the salespersons. Then this one now has the ID. But you notice that there's a little problem here. The problem here is that the closing parenthesis followed along. So we have not handled it. It needs to go. It's not part of the ID. Right? So we need to remove this column here. closing parenthesis, closing parenthesis, closing parenthesis, as you could see, as you could see here. So how do we do it? We can use a function called replace value. This replace value, it's within the transform group, right? So I can click on replace value. What replace value does is it gives you the option to specify which value you want to replace, and then what are you going to replace it with. So we'll see that now. I click on that. Okay, sorry, I need to select the entire column. Let me select the entire column, right? Then click on replace value. Then it now asks me value to find. There is replace value with another in the selected columns. So what are the values I want to? What is that value I want to replace? In my case, it is closing parenthesis. Then what am I replacing it with? I want it to just go, so I will not put anything here. If I put a letter here, let's say I put plus here, it will be replaced with plus. But since I want it to be entirely, I just want the numbers to stand. I can just delete it and leave this one empty as it is, right? So remember that if you mistakenly put a space here, it's counted as a character, right? So just make sure you leave it empty. You can still use this method to replace value with any other thing later on, but in our case, we just leave it empty. So I'll click on OK. Now it's gone, right? The closing parenthesis is gone, right? So we are making some progress. So at this point, I would want to confirm that you can still hear me and see my screen. Please, someone should confirm. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Okay, you can still hear me and see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know that I'm not alone. Alright, so we've handled that and we're getting closer and closer to our destination. Now, going by that rule of a clean data that we just uh, introduced, there's an issue here. We have north, east, south, and west. These are four different values that could be safely represented under a column. I can I can put all these under one common column called what? Region. Region is something like an umbrella name that can encompass all this. So an opportunity to know whether when to create a column is when you see that certain data in a row can be put under an umbrella, like there's a common name that we can group them under. Whenever you see that opportunity, then you are likely going to need to create a column for that. So to make your data clean, right? So how can I achieve this? Okay, in this case, how can I achieve this? How can I create a column such that this thing here, this one you see here, will be here? I mean, will come like everything, this, this, and this. Instead of having it in this wide format, I can now have them under long format like this one under it, this one under it, this one under it, and so on, right? So a method to achieve that is called pivoting. Let me see, what is that feature? Okay, all right. So so to unpivot rather. So when you unpivot, columns that were in wide formats, they will come under long formats, right? So, but I think before we get to that, let me see if there's something else we can do. Let's see if there's something else we can do to we'll get into that. You'll notice that this salesperson is supposed to be here, right? It's supposed to be at the column. It's supposed to be the column name. All these column names you are seeing now were just auto-generated. They are not yet in the form that they are supposed to be, right? So let me now see if I can unpivot now, and basically let's see how to unpivot. Okay, so I select this, select this, select this, and select this. If you want to select multiple columns, right, you can just simply click on the first column, hold your control key down, go to the last column you want to select and click it. Sorry, hold your is it control or shift? Hold your shift key and then go to the last column you want to select and click on that, and you select everything once. Or you can just click on the first one, hold your shift key, move to the right to select down, move to the right to select, move to the right to select, or to the left, whichever direction you want to go. But if you have a large table to a large column to select, just click on the first one, hold the shift key down, then hold the shift key down, then go and click on the fourth, the last one, and everything is selected. So we've selected this column. We need to now unpivot, and then you'll find the unpivot under transform, the transform tab here, which is this. So I can now, when I click on that, I can now click here on pivot columns. That's on pivot columns. Then we want to unpivot these columns we selected, or we want to unpivot other columns, or you want to unpivot only selected column. Like in our case, if I say unpivot other columns, it means every other column I did not select will be unpivoted. So in this case, I want to unpivot column. Now it's now created two different columns called attributes and value, right? Now let me go back some step. It will be very difficult um, to unravel this at this point because our tables were not appropriately named. But let me what the value, what attribute and value does is that, let me go just some steps back. The values I want are this north, east, south, and then west, right? These are the values. But then what, how can I now know this one was on its own column before, this one was in its own column before, and so on and so forth. So the values are these things I'm interested in. Now, sorry, let me just go some steps back. Where am I? These are attributes, then these are values, right? Okay, I think we might need to do some magic here. Not really magic, but we might need to do some tricky thing here to make it easy for us to handle this without needing. So what I would likely do here, the way this thing is, it can be difficult to comprehend. Like I don't want to have this. I don't want to have this still looped in together with the sales value, right? I don't want this to loop together with the sales value, right? So let me see what I can do now. Mm, Let me go some steps backwards. Or or the salesperson. If I say let me push this up at this point, it might not give us what we want. Okay, yeah, I want to do something a little tricky now. See what I would do. I would push this row up. One thing you know about cleaning data with Excel is that it can be like you need to call on your intuition, like some like you just things can just go some, it requires some level of creativity to just figure out the best way to handle something so it will not be so troublesome. So what I want to do now is I want to push this row up, right? I want to push this row up so that we now have, instead of column 1.1.1, I now have salesperson. Here is now going to be null because there's no value here to represent. Then I can just have this. I don't even need this date information before. Another thing you notice is that this column, this one called north will go up, east will go up, south will go up, and west will go up, and so on. So that we now have just the value, the actual value here, right? So let me just do that quickly, and then let's see what without we can have a headway. I'll just, when I selected, okay, let me click here, use first row as header. Are you sure you want to insert and intermediate step? Yeah. Yeah, let me remove this pivoting we did now. Let me just insert, use first row as header. Yeah, so we now have it in this form, right? So I can simply rename this one as date. Double click to rename it date, right? Then this one is salesperson ID, salesperson ID, right? Then this one does not need to change. You have salesperson, that's the name of the salesperson, salesperson ID, date. So it now looks like this one, and this one are in order, save for this salesperson that is here, right? I don't need this salesperson here again. This one, this very one here. I don't need this very one here. Since I already have that information at the top, I already know that everything here is for salesperson. I don't need to demarcate again. I want everything to be one column. So let me just filter and remove that. And removing it will be safe because I'm not going to lose any other data. Oh, no, no, no. If I remove it at this point, I'm going to lose some data actually. But that really matter. I'm not sure that will matter. If I filter this row, if I filter this salesperson, it means this null value is going, this date is going, yes, which will not affect anything. This one is going, yeah, it will not also affect anything because I already have this not here. So everything here under here is not, right? So it will not affect anything when I filter it since I already have the information I need here. So let me just quickly filter that and then we'll be safe. So let me quickly filter that salesperson, uncheck that, then click on OK. Yeah, right. So we are good. We are making some progress. So now I think we can now unpivot again. So we now have salesperson containing only name, salesperson ID containing the actual ID, date containing only date information. But then the only issue we have now is that we still have north, east, south, and west in their different columns. We need them to be in one column. So we are going to repeat this unpivoting we did initially. Let me select the four of them and then unpivot. The attribute and the value, these are the values we need in the column. But then this value is for north, this one is for east, this one is for south, this one is for west. So let's select the four of them we want to unpivot and then come here on pivot columns, then unpivot. So we now have those four, we now have two new columns created. So these are the attributes. The attributes are now the region. The value are the values that each of those regions contained. Remember, before we did that, let's go back a step just before that. Just before that, we had the name of the region, and then we don't have the name of the region like this. We now have the sales record for that region. East, we have the sales record for East. Everything under here are sales record for East. South, everything under it are sales records, and so on. So when I pivoted, this one, this one, this one, and this one were now reshaped such that we now have record for this. It will now come to this first cell, pick this value not, right? And then pick this attribute not, and then pick the value which is 373 and give it in it and place it in its own column, which is now the value column. It will now come here. It will now come here, pick this value east and place it under not. Pick the sales value for east, which is 5209, and place it in the column for east. For value, right, that corresponds to it. It will pick south here. Instead of putting it here, it will now come and place it somewhere here, and then pick this sales value, this first sales value, and place it in its own column, and continue in that way. Let's just go to the next the step after to see what I have been explaining. So you can now see that instead of it being north, east, south, and west, we now have north value for north, east value for east, south value for south, west value for west, right? Then it now came again. By the time it's done with those four, we unpivoted four columns. By the time it's done with picking these values one after the other, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's now that is picking this one, this one, this one, this one, and giving them their values 1, 2, 3, 4. It came again to the second row here. It still picked this one and then pick this value, pick this one, pick this value, pick this one, pick this value, pick this one, and pick this value to form their own row as well. Repeated the same thing until everything was placed in order, right? That's what we now have. We now have a longer column. If you watch here, just the step before it, the size of our data was 48 rows, as you can see here. The size of our data was 48 rows, 7 columns, 48 rows, right? So, but by the time we are done on pivoting, we now have 5 columns, 192 rows. So on pivoting gives you a longer data, while pivoting gives you a wider data. Now, as a rule, you should strive to have a longer data than a wider data. A cleaned data, a well-structured data, is usually in longer form, so we have more rows. So as much as possible, when you have a data set that has many columns, try as much as possible to reduce the size of the column. Whenever you see opportunity to reduce the size of the column, then leverage that. That will help make your data a clean data, right? So at this point, we have actually done the bulk of the work in transforming this data to the format we need. Just that we need to rename this. Instead of attribute, we call it region to make more sense. Then instead of value, we now have sales. These are the actual sales, right? And as you can see, we've actually gotten to what we want it to be like. Everything is in order at this point, right? Because okay, salesperson is the data type is the next thing we want to check. Data type, we now have salesperson is in a kind of text, yeah, which is correct. Salesperson ID, this one we don't necessarily need it, so we don't necessarily need to perform any calculations with it and all that, so you can just leave it like this, or you can even change it to text. It will not really matter that much. Yeah, it will not matter that much. I can just change it to text. Yeah, so that I will not start doing a sales ID divided by sales ID. It will never amount to anything. So I just leave it like this. And then date, yeah, date is in the right form. Region, yeah, region should be text. Then sales value, yeah. No, sales value is not yet in order. You could see now that it is in a mixed type. We now have ABC 1, 2, 3. I want it to be number, complete number. It was like that before because before we pivoted, right? Before we pivoted, we had that in one column. Okay, let's go some steps before that. Before we pivoted, we had one column like this node, for instance, or even let me even go far before back further. You can see that before we did any initially, we had some text and number in one column. This is not, which is a text. This is a 373, which is a number, and so on. So there's a mixed type here, and it inherited it up to this point, right? So we need to correct it. We need to, now that everything we have here is just numbers, right? We need to restore it in the right form, which is numbers. So I can just click on this, click here, and then convert it to whole number. No, not necessarily whole number. I can convert it to decimal in case decimal points. So it's now 1.2, which is in decimal data type. So having done that, I can just, now my data is in order. I can now transform. I can now load and close. That means I can go back to the home menu, home tab, then click on close and load, close and load. So we'll have the data, clean data populating here. Just watch. It's loading to a new sheet. Right? This is the one we just did. So we now have our data in the format it should be. The first one we cleaned was this one. The one I used to, the original data was in this form, but the cleaned one is now in this form, right? So our data is in order at this point. So at least this class, we've learned how to have a giving us a foundation on how to clean our data and things to look out for. It takes practice to perfect it. Or yeah, so that brings to an end the first session, the first half of this session, right? So I would like to entertain some questions, like 2 questions, before we now move to the next one, which is on macro. If you have any question, kindly ask. Hello. I hope you can still hear me.
Not for now.
Okay, no question for
No
now.
question for now.
Okay, all right. So the other thing we'll now go into is macro, Excel macro, and then what is a macro? Excel is just a feature in Excel that lets us define certain steps. Let's say perform an action. You can see it as a bot. It imitates your steps. If you take a step, it takes note of it. Then next time you don't want to take that step again, you want it to take that step on your behalf. So a macro is a feature in Excel that records steps we took to achieve a particular purpose so that we can replicate it next time, right? So if for instance I okay, most of the time you will not have macro enabled by default. So I want us to do one thing. If you're on your laptop at this moment, can you launch Excel? I will give like 5 minutes for everyone to launch their Excel so that we can enable macro and then proceed. So please, if you're on your laptop, kindly launch your Excel and then let me know when you're done so we can give 5 minutes to achieve that. And I'm waiting. Okay, now that we have our Excel launched, can you quickly go to this this place, the file tab, click on file, right? As if you're going to save a file. Have you done that?
Yeah.
Alright. Now come down to if you see option, click on that. I mean if you see option that just at this left bar, click on that. But if you did not see it and you see something like more, click on more.
More. Yeah. Okay.
Then you can see option, right? Click on option and it opens this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now look at this left bar. Currently it's selected general. Come down here where we have a customized ribbon. This place, customized ribbon. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
If you click on that,
Hmm?
it opens another. Now, when you come to this very place, we now have customized ribbon, right? You can see these main tabs, right? Look for developer. It may not be checked at this point in your own. If you've not done that before,
Yes, it's not
not
checked.
checked. All right, check it.
Okay.
Okay, so you can now safely click OK. Look at where OK is. Just click OK. Have you done that?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So you now notice that in Excel, there's a new tab.
Yeah. Now.
Yeah, you can see it, right? I want to see
Yeah.
this. All right. Okay. I don't know why this is like this. How do I take this out? All right. Next. Okay. So we now have when you click on developer, you are going to see options. Ah, it's- Click on developer. You see additional features in Excel, right? You see Visual Basic, macro, record macro,
Macros.
use relative reference, and the rest. Excel add-ins, properties, and like a lot more than you had originally, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so part of the automation tools we're going to use are like the Visual Basic and macro. Let me click on Visual Basic. Let's see. So not everybody actually know that even in Excel you can. write code to automate certain things, right? But we will not be going into that for now. So, but you just have to know that those features exist. Actually, it's for uh, advanced users, right? By the time you start coding in Excel, and somehow, except you have a strong reason for doing that, it it gives you more power. But then I think Excel is made to help us achieve our goal without having to code. That was why the product was developed in the first place. So except when you know what you want to do, you may not necessarily be needing it at this moment, but just know that it exists, and we will still somehow come back to this place, but not necessarily to start coding. So just watch. I'll close it out for now. Let me go back again. The second thing you notice here, the second thing you can see here is macros, right? And macros are what I already mentioned, that they enable us to to repeat a certain step, like they record our steps, the steps we take in doing a particular thing. Then later on, we can apply that step to a different data set, right? So
Okay.
let me now do certain. Let me just do one particular. Let me just take a simple action. I'll close this Excel file for now. Let me close this, and then where do we go from here? Let me look for a different data set. Yes, you remember the last session we had. That was our first session, right? We did something that day. We created some kind of column highlighters and the rest, right? We did something like that. We worked on a data set.
Yeah.
We highlighted columns and the rest. Let me go back to that data set. Let's use let me just copy it to you so that whatever changes we are going to make will remain with our data for today. Let me quickly do that. Let me copy the sample superstore data set. Go back here and just paste it here. One. Right. That will create its own folder just to keep things organized. I should have done this before now. For session 3. Right. So under session 3, I can just paste my data. But it's still the same sample superstore. Right. So I would launch this. Let me copy this file and paste here. I'm doing it for a reason. You'll still find out. Um, Let me call it data set data one, data two. Let me call this one data one. Let me call this one data two. Right. What we want to do by this is that this is the same data. This data is the same as this one, right? But then I want to do certain. I want to perform certain actions on this one, then record them in macro, then I now test them on this second data. That's what I want to do. So let me click this one to open it. So the first thing I would want to do here, let me quickly remove the formatting we applied to this data set that day. But you could remember the day we did this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just remove those formatting and clear formats. Yeah, it's clean now. Now, I told you that day, I mentioned that day that the steps we applied there, if we get a different data set now that still contains this kind of record, we will still need to replicate, we will still need to repeat these steps, which now takes away the idea of automation. By doing that, by having to do it anytime we need it, it means we've not yet automated anything. So what do we do? Let me just hide the columns that we may not need. Let me just hide the columns that we may not need. Um, so now we kind of a simpler data. Okay, focus more. Custom code, I don't need that. Product ID, don't need this. No. Product name. Okay, let me hide those columns now. Hide. Okay, at least we have something. Oh, I mean, simpler now. Okay, this one is not in the right order yet. This is supposed to be date. It's supposed to be in date format. So I can just come here and sorry, I can just let me just right click format cell. Yeah, I can do it for me. Just change it to date. So that's what it should be. Okay, yeah. So I just change this one to date. What I want to do now, I want to perform the same steps we did that day for sales. I want to plot a kind of a highlighter. I kind of want to, I want to have a glance of this, right? Kind of plot a bar such that the sales value, the length of the bar corresponds with the sales value. So for me to quickly spot sales of higher values, instead of having to look at the figures one after the other, I can just, as I'm scrolling, I can quickly see that. So I want to do that now. But in doing that, I want to record this step so that when next I open another file entirely, I can still duplicate the same thing, right, without having to redo it by myself. So what I will do now is I'll go back to this developer. Then in macros, under macros, I can click on record macros. Please, before you do that, right? Before you do that, make sure you are set, because once I click on record macros, whatever action I take is going to be recorded, right? So I click on that. Let me call it. Let me give it a name. Basic. Okay, I can't have a space. Basic for Martin. Basic formatting. Now I can give it a shortcut, a control. I mean keyboard shortcut, such that the next time I open another file and call on that shortcut, it will apply the macros we want to create now. So I can say control R, right? Control R. Okay. I wonder why it's putting control shift R. Okay, control R. Okay. So I can store it as this workbook. No. The first step, you can save your macro to your personal macro workbook, right? To a separate workbook, or you can let the workbook, or you can let the macro be just within this very workbook, right? So let me save this to my personal macro workbook so that it will no longer be dependent on. Or let's start simpler. Let's start small first. Let's say this workbook. So let me just describe the macro. Macro uh, records steps to formatting my sales data, right? Okay, let me click. The moment I click OK, I bind this with keyboard Control K. So let me click on OK. The moment I click OK, anything I do now is recorded. So I go here to Home tab. Okay, I select this column first, recorded. Click here, it's recorded. Then I come here, When it was that conditional formatting, right? Click on that. Go to highlight cells. No, I want to plot data bar. Right. Let me select the data bar I want to plot. Let me just put this orange color. Click on that. Right. Recorded. Then I want to give this a border. Let me give this one a border. This, this. Let me shade it. Give it a border of black, then white font. Use white font. Make it bold. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for now, let me stop recording so that we can. Let me stop recording. Let me go back to developer, and you notice that instead of record macros, I'm now seeing stop recording. So I click on stop recording. I just recorded some steps now. Now let me go to macros. Click on macros. The macro we created is basic formatting. We have it now, right? Now let's see the code it generated. Every step we took was recorded in this code. The first thing was to okay. Hello, hello, hello. Can you see me?
Yes, I'm following.
Okay. So what we did first, the description we gave it is this. I gave it a name, basic formatting. Wow, that's this line. Then record steps to formatting my sales data. This is it here, saved here as a comment. Then
So wait, you went to developer
yes,
and
then
then opened
macro.
macro and
Yes,
then
after I
it
had clicked on
automatically,
stop recording.
yes, then it automatically shows you.
No, I clicked on step into. Let me repeat that. Let me just go back. So see it here. I come here, developer, macros, then step into. It shows me this. I can now see the code. The first thing is the first thing I did was after setting the keyboard. Our keyboard shortcut is Control plus Shift plus R. I think it added this shift automatically. Maybe this control keyboard shortcut was already binding to another um, function or feature of Excel. I don't know. But the first thing action we took was to select that column that contains sales, which is column R. That's what was recorded here. Columns R to R dot select. Then
Mm-hmm.
this now I now went to select format. I mean condition formatting, right? By the time I clicked on home conditional formatting, right? I selected that conditional formatting. So it was recorded. Then under conditional formatting, I now selected the show value, right? Then set first priority. Like these are the steps to these are the functions that I was calling in directly. Those times I was clicking on those steps, right? These are those
Yeah.
steps, right? Then even when I gave it a shade, even when then the next thing I did was selection dot format condition. Like fill the bars, right? You may not see everything. Like the steps here may include some sub steps that were not obvious to us. So I now
Yes.
fill bar, right? Then a lot of other things followed. They will now have format condition, the negative bar, and so on and so forth. So everything we did was recorded here, right? So
Mm.
we now have it saved. So let me go back to that very data. Let me go back to this data, clear the format just like I did before, and then see if our um, macro can repeat it for us. We can call our macro clear format. So clear format. So this data is now in the original form. Except the only thing that changes is that in the original form I had to convert this, but we're not even interested in this format. So let me now call on that macro now. Let me call Control Shift R. I just clicked on Control Shift R. Did you notice what happened? Yeah? Did you notice anything?
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay. So by the time I called Control Shift
Yes, I
R,
can hear you.
okay, by the time I clicked on Control Shift R, this data is in the form it was before, right? No formatting and the rest. But then let me just call on that keyboard. Let me just call that macro without using the keyboard shortcut first. Call on that macro. I keep saying that I hate this. I hate to see it. All right. So let me just go back to the macro first. Go back to macro. This is a macro. Let me click on run. I can run it. So by clicking on run, I now have this. Right. So those steps which were to select this, apply this bar data bar, select this one, give it a dark shade, change the font to color to white, give it a bolded font size and text. I mean, this thing, bold the font, and then so everything I did has been restored. Like everything was automatically done. Even if I close it again, even if I clear those formats again, I can still anytime I sorry,
Okay.
anytime I did not select everything. Sorry, let me select everything. Let me clear the formats. So whenever I am on this workbook, so far it is this workbook, I click on Control Shift R, or I just go to here, developer, macros, and then select this macro. The just one we have now. Select this macro, click on run. This function will apply. This formatting will apply, right? So these are just like building blocks to achieving something bigger. But notice that macros
Okay.
macros cannot be reversed. As you can see now, I'm clicking on Ctrl Z to undo what I did, but you can see that it's resulting in error. So if it was something that transforms the underlying data itself, perhaps I just deleted the column here. I just deleted the column here. If I'm not careful, maybe I use macro to delete a column here. If I'm not careful, I may not have that data back again. Right. So that's one thing to take note of. That steps you took in macros are not reversible, unlike normal. Like if I come here and enter 2, 3, 4, 5, right, like this. If I click on Control Z, I can undo it. Control Y,
Yes,
redo,
normally.
undo, redo, undo, right?
So
So
you
you
said
said
the point
point
of
of
macro
macro
is
is sorry.
uh,
Come again.
so
So
the
the
point
point
of
of
macro
macro
is
is
hello,
hello,
can
can
you
you
hear
hear
me?
me? Yes.
So
So
what
what
is
is
the
the
total
total
point
point
of
of
macro?
macro
Like
like? Okay. The total point of macro is that it can be used to automate a process. Remember that we are still working on our first, like we've not yet applied that macro to our second. I'm still in data one, so I'm just testing, experimenting, right? So
okay.
okay, take this data two as another data entirely different from this one. Let's say every week you are handed over the sales report, the sales record for that particular week, right? So let's call this one week one, week two, week you are still expecting week three, week four, week five, week 900, and then you still need to
Okay.
prepare. Let's say every Friday at the close of work, you'll be handed over this record for the week, so that you can now prepare the report for your company's let's say stand up, what do they call it, is it stand up, that's on the Monday of the next week, right?
Yeah.
So you need to get this report ready. It means that every time they hand you this thing over to you, you have to work on this every single time, and it's still the same thing you're repeating over and over. So why can't you just automate it? So we just did a basic automation now with macro, right? We saw that we could perform certain actions, save the steps, and then perform certain actions, save the steps, and then instead of having to repeat the action every time, I will just open this file and click on the keyboard shortcut I called. Just I click on the keyboard shortcut I just created for the sake of this very action, right? And then it does what I thought I want it to do for me, what I've defined in that macro, right? So this is just the report for the first one. When I open the second file and call on that function, that macro, which is a control shift R. Just watch control shift R. I don't need to do anything for it to put my data in this form again. Did you get that now? So that's the point of macro. Save steps for you. Repeats like records the steps I took to perform an action. Saves it so that the next time I don't need to repeat those steps again.
Okay, so it's just saving it and copying it.
Yes, it's just saving those steps for me. And then the next time I don't need to repeat those steps. I can just call it. It's just like predefined steps to achieving a particular purpose that you know is going to keep repeating over and over and over. Just automate it. That's the automation part. So I'll still once more clear this one. Now what I want to now do is to go to the second data and test this
Okay.
macro on it. Remember we have a copy of this data file, data set. Right, so we have a copy of it, which is data 2. Although they are the same thing,
Yeah.
but I want you to see it as a totally different record, right? So um before I can achieve that, I would need to let me open it for now and then show you something. Let me click on let me launch it. So this is the second table now, on the second file now, right? Okay, it's still in the
Yeah.
form. It's still in the form we left it the other time. Let me just clear format. Right, okay. So we have it like the first one. Let me click on Control Shift R. Control Shift R. Did you notice anything?
Yes.
So can you explain like what you noticed?
The same thing repeated.
Okay. Now you know that this is table data 2 now, no longer data 1.
For the sales column. Yeah.
Yes, data 2, no longer data 1. But then it still performs the same step for me. So I don't need to repeat these steps I
So
took
it
to format this thing. Sorry?
so it will only repeat it on the sales column.
Yes.
Okay.
To repeat it on the sales column. And it was on the sales column we actually
So
defined it.
this data one and data two,
Hmm.
they are related documents, right?
They are
They are the same document. Like let's say data two is the one you built up from
yes.
before, right? Okay.
Data 2. Remember initially I copied data. I copied the data. Like I duplicated it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So a better way to understand is maybe the organization of the data is what might confuse. But let's say now, let me just convert this thing to let's say these are like orders for different time periods. Convert
Mm.
format cells, convert to date. Okay. So this one, the date the order was placed. Let me just filter by the date the order was placed and save them as different data sets. Filter order dates. This is 2017, 16, 15, and 14. So let me just split them into different years. This is 2014. Okay, this is 2017. Let me just copy this. Copy this. Let me create a new cell for it, a new worksheet for it, which I will call 2017 order. Let me paste it here. Let me paste it here. Then, oh, something is messing up now. You still inherited the formatting. That's not an issue. Let me now go back. I just want to split this data into four different files. Perhaps it would make more sense what we are trying to achieve in the first place. So this 2016 now, I'll still do the same thing. Copy it. Control C. Save the file. I mean a worksheet. Alright. 2016 order. Okay. Let me just paste it here. So what I want to do now, I want to save these two different things as two separate files, 2016 and 2017. Let me save them as separate Excel worksheets. I mean separate CSV files. Save as this session 3. Let me save this one as 2017 order. Orders 2016, right? Orders 2016. Then go back to this one and save this one. Save this one as orders 2017. Let's wait. Orders 2017. 2017. Okay, so let's have it. Okay, so let me just restore the old table as the full table that we had before. Let me select everything. Okay, so I just needed to have export these two tables, so I can just safely delete this. Yes, delete. Let me safely delete this one too. Yes. Okay, Control S. Let me close this and close this too. Now you notice that this one I want to close now is data one. That was where I defined the macro, right? If I close this without saving it as a macro enabled workbook, I will not be able to use those macros I defined initially again. So one option for me is to either save it the next when I'm creating a macro, I can save it to a separate workbook entirely, the one called personal macro workbook, which is no longer dependent on the exact workbook I'm working on. Or if I define it in a certain workbook, then I would have to save that workbook as a macro enabled workbook, like you can see here now. So here it's saying the following features cannot be saved in macro free workbooks. The .xlsx file is a macro free workbook, so it will not be able to save well. Alright, so what do I do next? It says to save a file with these features, click no and then choose a macro enabled file type in the file type list. To continue saving as a macro free workbook, click yes. So I'll click on no. If I click on no, I will save it as a macro enabled workbook. But before I do that, let me go back here and see if I have a better alternative. If I have a better way to do that, let me just see if I can click on here. Let me go back to my macros and see if I can save it to. Okay, so see what I want to do now. I don't want us to replicate the same step again. I just want to copy this macro. I want to copy this macro.
So let's say I'm done with this file that I enabled, or this one that I enabled macro.
Mhm.
I want to start a completely new one.
Mm.
Will it still apply to that, or I have to go and reset everything?
The goal is to make sure it applies. That's what we're trying to achieve. Because this one we recorded it and saved it to this workbook. So if I open this workbook, whenever this workbook is not opened, this macro will not be enabled. So I want to do it in a way that the macro will still be enabled, even if it's not exactly this workbook, right? So I want to go back and see if I can record macro, and let me see if I can create. I'm not seeing the option to create. Oh, no. Okay, let me just see if I just want to create a macro, and can I call it basic formatting um soon, or let me say reusable. I don't know if I got it spelling correct. Reusable. Well, that's English. I can just give it my own keyboard binding of let's say control. Let's say the same control R. Okay. But then instead of saving it to this workbook, I can save it to personal macro workbook. So performs basic formatting of my data. So click on OK. Okay, yeah, I already assigned that keyboard to something else. So I can just call it T. I think your background is kind of noisy. So I click on OK. So anything I do now is recorded. So I just want to resave that steps I created initially. Let me just go back and save it. Let me just go back and end stop recording. I did not perform any action. Let me open it and see if I can. Yeah, let me go to step into. It did not record any much step here. So I will just delete this one and paste that other one I copied initially. The other step I created, right? So I can now, let me save it. I have saved this one to my personal uh, macro this thing. So it's expected that even if I don't save this one again, I don't want to save this one again. Let me just go, you can click yes. I have saved my file. Let me close this one out. Now, if I open a fresh blank Excel file, let me see if I can launch Excel again. When I launch it, I can, let me open a blank worksheet or workbook. Okay, so when I open this workbook, let me go back to my saved macros and see. Oh, will I be able to see it? Yeah, this personal basic formatting saved to my personal macro. I have opened a new macro, a new workbook now, but then the macro I saved initially is still here. So I can step into, I may not be able to do it directly. So let me just step into here and I can see those steps those things I pasted. So even if I open a totally different workbook, if I open a totally different workbook, the macros I already saved to my personal macro workbook will still apply. So this is where we now we will now apply those macro to this new set of data sets, this 2016 and 2017, that that are completely different from this one where I created a macro and this one where I tested it out that time. So let me say they handed you this report in 2016, you want to apply that macro. In 2017, you still want to reuse that macro, right? It could be something you do on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly, or yearly, depending on your preference. So this one was, let me just clear the format because the format is following it because of when we copied it that time. So let me just clear format and then see if I can test that macro on this new data set, this new file that has not seen it before. Let me click on Control Shift T. Going into an error. What is the error? Okay, let me see if I can just go there straight. Macro run. Alright, great. So that worked. Just that I can't see why the keyboard shortcut didn't work yet. So let me go back and see if we did not save the keyboard shortcut well. Let me go back here and see if we correctly step into Control Shift R. Okay, yeah, it's Control Shift R I was supposed to click instead of Control Shift T. So what do I do? Let me call on Control Shift R. Control Shift R. Why not? Oh no. Control Shift R. Ah, something is breaking. Alright, let me go back. Okay, there was no keyboard binding. Control Shift R. Yeah.
Was it keyboard what?
I did not bind it to any keyboard. Like I copied it. I copied the other macro we created in the first workbook. I just pasted it into a personal macro workbook, right? So I did not bind the keyboard. It did not offer me the keyboard, the interface where I could do the keyboard binding. So that Control Shift R that we entered in the first place did not follow through, but I've effected that now. So I have now set the option, this keyboard shortcut, Control Shift R, so that when I call on Control
The
Shift R,
network is breaking.
oh, sorry.
Network. Since the network is breaking.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
It's breaking.
Wow.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. I don't know why my it's not. Yeah. Is it still breaking?
It's okay. I think just continue. Let me.
Okay. Maybe I think I believe. Although sometimes I don't even trust the quality of the recording.
Okay.
So I just added a keyboard shortcut to it, which is Control plus Shift plus R. So I can now call on that. So let me just call Control Shift R, and it worked. So the step I've applied here worked. Now let me open the 2017 orders data and call on that macro again, which is a totally different one. We'll just call it on 2016. If I call it on 2017, at this point 2017 is opening. But although it's okay,
So
let's
you
use
click CTRL R or Shift R
yes,
for 2016.
yes, that's the keyboard we defined for it. Yeah, that was the shortcut we defined for it, right? Mhm. So, but if you are doing it, you have to be careful not to use there are other already defined keyboard shortcuts in Excel. So, like if I do Control plus Shift Z, it may be doing a different. I may be overwriting a keyboard shortcut that I already created in that is Excel already bundles with. So you have to do your research first. So this is 2017 workbook. Let me call
It's
on.
breaking.
Hello,
Hello?
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, let me call the shortcut Control Shift R. You could see now. So this is just a basic operation I did actually. But imagine I have a longer operation I needed to perform that I recorded each of them, and then I just simply needed to call a keyboard shortcut to it, and then my data will be formatted appropriately. So this is just like to give us a basic glimpse of what macro is. we still have a class whereby we're going to use this macro to record a kind of a report to automate like something like a report, right? So it's just to show you a tip of the like how do they say it, tip of the iceberg also of what macro is and the ability to record steps in macro. So I can safely say that we've done justice to that introduction for today. And in the next class we would continue with macros. So I think our time is already spent. So if you have questions to ask, you can then. I have to stop recording. If you have questions, do you have any question?
No, I don't have any question, but
Okay.
we watch TV if I have any question.
Alright. Thank you so much for joining the class.
Thank you. Have a
Yeah.
good day.
So have a nice day.